The planet was silent, silent in a way that cut into the bones, a silence only broken by the howl of the wind. The world was white, endless white snow covering every hill, every valley, every stone. The sky above was gray, heavy with more storms waiting to fall. The cold here was not simple cold. It was a living thing, sharp and merciless, crawling into skin, breaking the spirit of anyone too weak to fight it. In this frozen world, one figure moved slowly across the snow. It was a Mother-Ann alien woman, her body tall and thin, her skin a pale silver color that almost blended into the storm. Her steps were weak, heavy, as if every movement cost her strength she no longer had. But she did not stop. She could not stop, because in her arms she carried a small bundle, wrapped in the last cloth she had left her child. The child was no older than 3 cycles, small, fragile, with faint glowing lines running across its skin. The lines flickered weakly, like a candle about to die. The child's breath was shallow, soft whimpers escaping its lips as the cold reached deeper into its tiny body. The mother pulled the child closer to her chest, trying to shield it from the icy wind. Her own body trembled, but she did not care for her own pain. Her eyes, wide and glowing with determination, never left her child's face. She had burned everything first. The small wooden shelter they had built weeks ago, gone into the fire. Then the few rags they had gathered for bedding, one by one, fed to the flames. And finally, her own clothes torn, piece by piece, sacrificed to the fire so that her child could have a few more hours of warmth. Now she had nothing left. Her skin was bare against the storm, frost crawling across her arms and legs. Every breath felt like knives cutting into her chest. Still, she held the child tightly. The snowstorm screamed louder, pushing against her face, but the mother forced herself forward. She looked at the sky as if searching for mercy, but no mercy came. Only endless gray clouds and the promise of more snow. She whispered, her voice hoarse, almost lost in the storm. "Stay with me, little one. Just a little longer." The child whimpered again, curling closer into her arms. The mother bent down, pressing her lips against its forehead. She could feel how cold the child had become. Her heart broke, but she refused to cry. Tears would freeze on her face. And besides, she could not waste the energy. In the distance, she saw the last ashes of her fire. Black smoke rising weakly into the storm, quickly eaten by the wind. That fire had been her hope, her shield, the thin line between life and death. But it was gone now, nothing but memory. She had burned it with her own hands. No clothes, no shelter, no fire. Only her and her child against the frozen world. Her knees weakened. She fell to the snow for a moment, clutching the child tighter. The ice burned her skin, but she refused to let go. Slowly, painfully, she pushed herself back up. She had to move. If she stayed, they would both die here. The mother's eyes scanned the horizon. There was nothing, no trees, no caves, no other living beings. Only endless white. But she did not allow despair to take her. Somewhere, she believed, there must be hope. Somewhere, there must be warmth. Her breath came in ragged gasps, now. The storm tore at her hair, covering her face with frost. She could no longer feel her legs, but still she walked. Every step was a fight. Every step a promise. She thought of the first time she had held her child, so small, so full of light. She thought of the laughter, the smile, the sound of life. That memory pushed her forward. The snow grew deeper. Her feet sank, dragging her down. She stumbled again, almost falling, but she forced her body upright. The child stirred weakly in her arms. The glowing lines on its skin dimmed further, almost fading out. Fear struck her heart like a blade. "No, please, not yet," she whispered, her voice breaking. The storm answered with another scream of wind. Her body was reaching its limit. The frost crawled higher across her arms, her chest, her neck. She could no longer feel her fingers as they clutched the child. Her vision blurred, shadows and light mixing in the storm. But she did not stop. She could not stop, because a mother does not stop. Her strength was fading fast, but her will burned brighter than any fire she had made. She staggered forward, half blind, half frozen, yet still alive. Every step was an act of defiance against the world itself. And yet, deep in her mind, a question grew, sharp and cruel. How long can love fight against the cold? The storm gave no answer. The mother stumbled once more, this time falling to her knees. The child let out a weak cry, softer than before. She pressed her face into the child's hair. Whispering a lullaby she barely had the strength to sing. Her voice trembled. But it was filled with love. The world around them was dying, but in her arms, she still held life, somewhere far away. Footsteps moved in the snow, but the mother could not see them yet. She only knew the storm. The cold and her child's heart beat against her chest, and still, she walked. The fire was gone. The last spark had died in the snow hours ago, leaving behind only black ashes buried under white frost. The smoke had vanished into the storm, and with it, the mother's last piece of warmth. Now, there was nothing. The alien mother stood in the storm, her body bare, trembling violently under the cold. Frost clung to her silver skin like cruel chains, biting deeper with every passing second. Her lips were cracked, her breath shallow, but her arms never loosened their grip around the child. The child was everything. The small body in her arms was quiet now, too quiet. No laughter. No sound of play. Only weak breathing, each breath slower than the one before. The glowing lines on the child's skin flickered faintly, almost gone. It was as if life itself was slipping away. The mother pressed her cheek against the child's head. Her voice was no more than a whisper. "Please, stay. Stay with me." Her own skin burned with frost, but she tried to shield the child with her body, curling around it like a shield of flesh and bone. The storm whipped at her back, snow slicing across her shoulders, but she did not move. She could not. There was no fire to fight the cold now. Only her no clothes, no shelter, no hope. She thought of the past, of the days when warmth was not a dream, but a memory. She remembered a small home, a roof of stone, the smell of cooked roots, the sound of her child's laugh filling the room. It felt like another life, a life stolen by this endless winter, a life she might never return to. The storm pushed harder. The mother's knees sank into the snow, her strength breaking inch by inch. The child whimpered, the sound weak, almost lost in the wind. That sound cut deeper into the mother than the cold ever could. Her hands trembled, not from weakness alone, but from fear. Fear of what the next minute might bring. Fear of silence, eternal silence, where her child's breath once was. Her eyes scanned the horizon again. Nothing. No village. No cave. No shelter. Just the endless white world that wanted them both to disappear. She wanted to scream, to fight the sky itself, but her throat was too dry, her voice too broken. All she could do was whisper the same words again and again, words that carried more power than any fire. Live. Live, my child. Her own body shook violently. She felt as if her bones were turning to ice. Still, she bent lower, pressing her body tighter against the child. Giving every last bit of heat she had left, the storm seemed endless. Each minute stretched into eternity. She felt her strength slipping like sand through her fingers. Then, for a moment, everything went still. The wind paused, the snow seemed lighter, and the world grew quiet. In that silence, the mother heard only one thing: the faint, fragile beat of her child's heart. Slow, weak, but still there. She closed her eyes, tears freezing on her lashes. That sound gave her the strength to rise again. She forced herself to stand, though her legs felt like stone. She stumbled forward, her feet dragging through deep snow. She had no direction, no path, but she moved. Movement meant life. Stopping meant death. Her body was failing. She knew this truth. But as long as she could carry her child, she would fight. Her skin was numb. She could no longer feel her fingers gripping the child. She could no longer feel her toes inside the frozen ground. Her body was becoming nothing more than a shell. But her heart still burned. The child stirred weakly in her arms. Its small hand reached up, brushing against her chest. The touch was so faint, but to the mother it felt like fire. A reminder that her child was still here, still alive. That single touch filled her with new resolve. The storm roared again, angry that she had not given up. Snow whipped against her face, cutting like blades. But she lowered her head, pressing forward step by step. There was no hope left in the world around her. But inside her arms, wrapped against her chest, there was still one fragile light. And for that light, she would endure anything. The mother did not know what tomorrow would bring. She did not know if her next step would be her last. But she knew this: she would not stop, because a mother's hope does not die, even when the world itself has, and somewhere far ahead, beyond the storm, something waited, something or someone that might change everything. The storm did not rest. The night had grown deeper, darker, and colder than before. The stars above were hidden by thick gray clouds, and the moon gave no light. The world had turned into a prison of endless white, where every breath was pain and every step was war. The alien mother's body had reached its breaking point. Her skin was raw, her lips blue, and her breaths shallow. Frost covered her arms like cruel armor, shining faintly under the storm. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the earth itself wanted to pull her down into the snow. But she refused to fall. Not yet. Her child was still alive in her arms, though weaker than ever. The glowing lines on its small body were almost gone now, dim like dying embers. Its tiny chest rose and fell slowly, so slowly that the mother had to press her ear against it to hear the faint rhythm of life. She whispered, her voice broken but steady, "I am here. I will not let you go." Her legs trembled. She stumbled forward, her feet sinking deep into the snow. The storm screamed against her face, trying to blind her, trying to silence her. The world wanted her to give up, but she did not. She could not. Then, without warning, her knees gave way. She fell into the snow, clutching the child tightly to her chest. The cold rushed into her bones, sharp and merciless. Her arms shook violently as she tried to rise, but her body refused. She lay there, the snow covering her shoulders, the storm wrapping her in its cruel embrace. This was the darkest hour. The moment where hope itself seemed to die. Her vision blurred. Shapes twisted in the snow. She thought she saw shadows moving in the distance, dark figures, tall and strange. For a moment, fear gripped her heart. Were they real, or only tricks of her dying mind? She blinked hard, but the shadows were gone. Only the storm remained. Her chest heaved as she fought for breath. Her hands shook, her strength fading like a candle in the wind. She could no longer feel her own body. All that remained was the child's faint warmth pressed against her heart. Her thoughts grew heavy, slipping like water through her mind. Memories rose instead, sharp and clear, as if her life itself was calling to her. She saw her child's first smile, bright and innocent. She heard its laughter like soft bells in spring. She felt the joy of holding it for the first time. The promise she had made that day, I will protect you, always. Tears froze on her cheeks. She had given everything: her clothes, her warmth, her strength. And still the cold wanted more. She leaned her forehead against her child's. If I must give my life for you, then so be it. The storm howled louder, as if mocking her words. The wind tore at her hair, covering her face with ice. Her eyes grew heavy, but she forced them open. She had to stay awake. She had to fight. But her body was too weak. Her arms shook, her chest ached, and her breath turned shallow. For the first time, fear of death truly touched her. Not for herself, but for her child. What would happen if she closed her eyes and never opened them again? Who would hold the child? Who would keep the storm away? The silence grew louder in her ears. The sound of her child's breathing faded. No, she whispered fiercely, summoning the last fire in her soul. Not yet. You will not die here. Her trembling body moved again, slow and heavy. She forced herself to rise, even as her knees buckled and her arms screamed with pain. She stumbled forward, each step dragging her closer to the edge of collapse. The snow swallowed her footprints as soon as she made them. As if the world wanted to erase her struggle. But still she moved. Still she fought. Still she lived. She pressed her lips to her child's forehead once more. Whispering words the storm could not steal. You are my light. As long as you breathe, I will fight. Her body swayed, her vision fading into black. She could barely see the world around her. But then, through the storm, through the endless white, something changed far ahead. Faint against the dark horizon, a glimmer appeared. Not the dull gray of the snow, not the cruel blue of the frost, but something different, something warm. A light. The mother blinked, unsure if it was real or only the trick of a dying mind. But the glow remained, small, flickering, waiting. Her heart surged. Her breath caught in her throat. Hope, small, fragile, but alive, returned. She tightened her hold on the child. Her voice broke, but her words were clear. Do you see it, little one? There is still hope. And with that, she stumbled toward the light. The storm raged on, wild and merciless. But the mother did not stop. Her body was broken, her strength almost gone, yet her feet dragged forward step by step. She held her child close, whispering weak songs, though her voice was little more than a trembling breath. Ahead, through the white veil of snow, the faint glow still shimmered. It was no star, no trick of the storm. It was real. A light. She staggered closer. Each step felt endless, each moment heavier than the last. Her vision blurred, but she forced her eyes open. She would not let darkness take her now, not while the child still breathed. Then, suddenly, the storm shifted. The wind paused for a brief moment, as if the world itself held its breath. Through the snow, a figure appeared. At first, she thought it was another shadow. But this shadow moved with purpose. It was taller than her kind, broad-shouldered, wrapped in layers of strange cloth and armor. A metal pack glowed faintly on its back, sending beams of light into the storm. It was not one of her people. It was something else. A human. The figure walked steadily, cutting through the storm with strong steps. The light on its chest pulsed with life, and in its hands it carried a device that hummed softly, scanning the frozen ground. The human was searching for something. The mother froze, clutching her child tighter. Fear gripped her heart. She had heard whispers of humans before, strange beings from the stars, explorers who crossed the void. But she had never seen one. Were they kind? Were they cruel? Would they help her, or would they turn away? The human stopped suddenly. His head turned. Through the mask covering his face, he saw the man-alien woman kneeling in the snow, holding a fragile child in her arms. For a long moment, time itself seemed to stop. The human stared. The mother stared back. The storm howled around them, but in that moment, silence filled the space between them. The human's light flickered across her body. He saw the frost crawling across her skin, the way she trembled violently, the way her arms never loosened from the small child she protected. He saw the desperation in her glowing eyes, and then he heard the soft, weak cry of the child. The sound cut through the storm. It cut through the cold. It cut through him. The human's chest tightened. He had seen many things on this frozen planet: broken ships, lifeless creatures, empty caves. But never this. Never a mother who had burned her own clothes, given her own warmth, sacrificed everything just to keep her child alive. He lowered his scanning device. Slowly, carefully, he took a step forward. The mother's breath caught. She pressed the child tighter, her body shaking. She wanted to trust, but fear whispered in her mind. What if he takes the child? What if this is the end? The human raised his hands, palms open, showing he carried no weapon. His voice came through the mask, muffled but calm. "I will not harm you." She did not understand the words, but she felt the tone. It was soft, gentle, not the voice of an enemy. Still, she did not move. The human stepped closer, slowly, never rushing, like one approaching a wounded animal. The light from his chest spread across the mother and child, warming the air between them. When he was near enough, he knelt in the snow. His eyes, visible through the visor, met hers. They were not cold like the storm. They were human eyes, tired, but filled with something stronger than the frost. Compassion. He looked at the child, then back at her. His gaze said what words could not. "Let me help." The mother's arms trembled. She wanted to refuse. She wanted to hold the child forever, even if death took them both. But something in the human's face broke through her fear. Hope. Her body swayed. Her strength finally gave way. She collapsed forward, barely able to hold herself up. The child slipped in her arms. With her last shred of will, she pushed the bundle toward the human. The human's eyes widened. He caught the child gently, wrapping it in his thick coat. The small body shivered against his chest, but he could feel its faint heartbeat. He looked back at the mother. She was on her knees, shaking violently, her breaths ragged. Her lips moved, whispering words he could not understand. But the meaning was clear. "Save my child." The human nodded once, firmly. "I will." Without wasting a moment, he reached for his pack. He pulled out a thermal blanket, wrapping it around the mother's shoulders. She flinched at the sudden warmth, but her eyes widened, a tear freezing on her cheek. The storm howled again, angry at this act of defiance. But the human did not care. He built a small shelter from his gear, shielding them from the wind. He set a portable heater on the ground, and for the first time in days, real warmth filled the air. The mother gasped as heat touched her frozen skin. The child stirred weakly in the human's arms, its glowing lines flickering brighter for the first time. The storm did not win. The human placed the child back into the mother's arms, but he covered them both with his coat. He looked at her again, his voice steady. "You are not alone anymore." She did not know the words, but she felt them. Deep in her heart, she felt them, and in the darkest storm, a fragile bond was born. The storm outside screamed like a living beast, shaking the thin shelter the human had built. Snow whipped against the fabric walls, but inside there was a fragile pocket of warmth. The heater glowed faintly, pushing back the frost. For the first time in many days, the alien mother and her child felt something close to safety. But safety came with questions. And questions came with fear. The mother sat weakly against the shelter wall, her body trembling even in the warmth. The silver of her skin was no longer dull with frost, though cracks and burns remained. Her child lay against her chest, wrapped now in the human's thick coat. The child's glowing lines pulsed faintly, no longer fading, but not yet strong. The human sat across from them, silent. His mask was off now, resting on the ground beside him. His face was pale, his jaw strong, his eyes weary yet kind. He studied the mother and child carefully, not with the cold eyes of a scientist, but with the watchful eyes of someone who cared. Still, he hesitated. He knew what he had found here was no ordinary discovery. This was no alien beast, no ruined machine. This was a family. A mother who had burned her own clothes to keep her child alive. A child whose life now hung by the thinnest thread, and he was the only one who could decide what happened next. Would he risk everything to save them? Or would he turn away, return to his people, and leave them to the snow? The mother's eyes never left him. She did not understand his words, but she felt the weight in his silence. Her heart beat hard in her chest. Every instinct told her to protect her child, even from this strange being. But every bone in her body told her she had no choice left. She had given everything. There was nothing more she could burn, nothing more she could sacrifice. If hope was to come, it had to come from him. The child stirred softly, letting out a faint cry. The sound broke the silence like glass. Both the mother and the human turned their eyes to the small life between them. The child's glowing eyes blinked once, weak but alive, staring up at the strange man who held the power of life or death. The human swallowed hard. He reached into his pack, pulling out a small vial of clear liquid. Medicine. Something to restore warmth. To give strength back to the dying. His hands shook slightly as he held it. If he gave it, the child might live. If he kept it, he could save it for his own kind. Supplies were short, and every resource mattered on this frozen world. This was the choice. He looked at the mother. Her eyes were wide, pleading, shimmering with tears that froze before they could fall. She did not speak his language, but she did not need to. Her whole body screamed the words, "Please, save my child." The human's chest tightened. He had seen soldiers in battle, explorers in danger, even comrades lost to the cold. But he had never seen anything like this, a mother who had fought the storm itself with nothing but her body. Refusing to surrender even as death closed in, he thought of his own mother, long gone now, but still alive in memory. He remembered her hands, her warmth, her voice telling him as a child, "One day you must be strong. Not just for yourself, but for those who cannot fight." His jaw clenched. The choice was no choice at all. Slowly, firmly, he moved closer. The mother tensed, clutching the child tighter. But then she saw his eyes, steady, filled with something she had not seen in many days. Kindness. He held up the vial, showing it to her before gently pressing it to the child's lips. The liquid slipped inside, and for a long moment, nothing happened. The storm outside roared louder, as if mocking the act. But then, faintly, the child's body stirred. The glowing lines on its skin flickered brighter than before. Its small chest rose with a deeper breath. A sound escaped its lips, not a cry of pain, but a sigh of life. The mother's eyes widened. Her hands shook as she touched her child's face, feeling warmth return, feeling strength return. Tears froze against her cheeks, but her heart burned with new fire. The human leaned back, exhaling slowly. His decision was made. He had given them his medicine, his warmth, his trust. He had chosen to fight for them, strangers though they were. The mother looked at him again. For the first time, her eyes softened. She bowed her head slightly, a gesture of respect, of thanks. She could not speak his words, but she whispered her own. "You saved us." The human did not understand the language, but he understood the feeling. He nodded once, his face steady. "You're not alone anymore." Outside, the storm raged on, furious at their defiance. But inside the small shelter, a fragile alliance had been born, and in that alliance, hope began to grow. The shelter was small, no bigger than a tent, but inside, it felt like a different world. Outside, the storm screamed and clawed at the frozen earth, but within these thin walls, there was warmth. A fragile warmth, but warmth still. The human worked quickly. His hands moved with steady purpose, setting up metal rods, tightening wires, adjusting the small heater so it burned brighter. The glow spread through the shelter, filling it with golden light that pushed back the cold. The hiss of fire replaced the endless howl of the wind. The alien mother watched him, her body weak but her eyes alert. She had never seen such tools before, never seen fire born from strange metal and humming machines. To her, it was like watching a magician pull light from the dark. Her child lay close against her, wrapped in a human's thick coat. Its glowing lines flickered brighter now, the medicine slowly giving strength. A faint sound escaped its lips, a sigh, almost a laugh. The mother pressed her lips to its head, her heart trembling with relief. For so long she had seen only fading light, but now there was a spark of life again. The human noticed. He paused, watching the child's glow return. His face softened. He knelt down, checking the small body with careful hands. The child blinked up at him, alien eyes meeting human eyes. For a heartbeat, both were still. Then the child reached out a weak hand and touched his glove. The human froze. He had not expected this. He looked at the mother, unsure if he had crossed some sacred line. But the mother did not pull the child away. She only watched, her eyes filled with something new. Not fear, not suspicion. Something gentler. Trust. The human nodded once. A silent promise. I will not fail you. He pulled another tool from his pack, unfolding it into a small metal dish. He placed frozen blocks of nutrient inside, letting the heater's warmth melt them into soup. The scent spread through the shelter, a strange mix of herbs and salt. The mother's stomach tightened at the smell, reminding her of hunger she had tried to ignore. The human noticed her gaze. Slowly, carefully, he offered the bowl. His eyes spoke before his lips did. Eat. The mother hesitated. She did not know this food. It smelled strange, foreign. But her body was too weak to resist, and her child needed her strong. She accepted the bowl with trembling hands. The warmth spread through her fingers, through her chest, through her soul. She tasted it. It was bitter at first, but then a deep warmth filled her. Her body, frozen for so long, finally felt alive again. Tears formed in her eyes, not from pain, but from relief. The human gave another small portion to the child, carefully helping it drink. The glowing lines on its skin grew brighter with each sip, pulsing like stars. The mother reached out, touching the light with wonder. For days she had watched it fade. Now she saw it return. She looked at the human again. He sat silently, watching them both, his face calm but his eyes heavy. He had chosen them over his own safety. He had shared his food, his medicine, his warmth. He was no longer just a stranger in the storm. He was something else, a protector. The heater hummed softly. The storm outside roared, but inside, time seemed to pause. For the first time in what felt like forever, the mother did not feel death breathing down her neck. She felt something she thought she had lost forever. Hope. She leaned back against the shelter wall, her arms tight around her child. Her body still ached, her skin still burned from frost, but her heart was stronger than ever. She whispered softly to her child, words of comfort, songs of home. The child's eyes closed, glowing lines pulsing gently with the rhythm of sleep. The human sat nearby, his rifle resting against his knee, his gaze fixed on the storm outside. He was tired, but he did not allow himself to sleep. He knew this world was cruel, filled with dangers beyond the cold. He would guard them. He had made his choice. Hours passed. The storm began to ease, its fury fading into gentle snow. The world outside was still dangerous, but less violent now. The human stood, stepping outside the shelter briefly. The mother watched him go, her heart tightening with worry. But through the thin walls, she saw him working, gathering snow, cutting blocks of ice, building something larger and stronger around their fragile home. He was building them a new shelter. When he returned, his face was red from the cold, but his eyes were firm. He checked on the mother and child again, ensuring they were safe. He did not speak much, but his actions spoke louder than words. The mother reached out, her hand trembling, and touched his wrist. It was a small gesture, but it carried everything she could not say. "Thank you." The human paused, then gave a small nod. His lips curled into the faintest smile. Inside the storm, two different worlds had met. A mother and her child, saved by a man who owed them nothing. A man who gave them everything anyway. And from that act, a fire had been born. Not just the fire of machines, not just the fire of survival, but the fire of hope. It was small. It was fragile. But it was alive. The storm had passed. Morning light touched the frozen world, spilling across the endless white. The snow was calmer now, lying in soft waves instead of sharp knives of wind. For the first time in many days, the alien mother opened her eyes and saw something other than darkness and despair. She saw light. The small shelter stood firm, surrounded by blocks of ice the human had stacked through the night. It was not a palace, but it was strong, and it was warm. Inside, the heater hummed, and the faint smell of cooked rations filled the air. The child stirred in the mother's arms. Its glowing lines pulsed brighter than ever before, no longer fading, but steady, alive. The small eyes opened, blinking at the light, and then softly, weakly the child laughed. It was a fragile laugh, but it carried through the shelter like music. The mother gasped. Tears blurred her vision as she pressed her face against the child's head. For so long she had feared she would never hear that sound again. But now it was real. The laugh of life the human watched quietly from the other side of the shelter. His face was tired, his body still stiff from the long night, but his eyes softened at the sight. He had seen battles, storms, and endless cold. But this simple sound felt like victory. The mother looked at him, her silver skin glowing faintly in the light. She could not speak his words, but she tried. She pressed her hand to her chest, then to her child, then pointed at him. Her voice trembled but carried weight. "You saved us." The human did not understand the language, but he understood the meaning. He nodded once, slowly. "No. You saved your child. I only gave you fire." The mother tilted her head, studying him. She did not know his words either, but his tone, his eyes, his face, everything told her the truth. He did not see himself as a hero. He only saw himself as a man doing what had to be done. The child reached out again, small fingers brushing against the human's glove. This time, the human did not freeze. He let the tiny hand rest there, warm against the cold fabric. For a moment, two worlds touched, not as strangers, not as enemies, but as family. The silence stretched, not empty, but full of unspoken promises. The human stood, pulling his coat tighter. He stepped outside, scanning the horizon. The storm had left deep scars across the land, but in the distance, he saw the faint smoke of his own camp. His people would be waiting. His mission was unfinished, but he also knew something else. He could not simply walk away. Not now. Not after what he had seen. The mother followed him to the entrance, her child in her arms. She looked at the endless white and then back at him. Her eyes asked the question she could not say aloud. What happens now? The human looked at her for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice low but firm. "You come with me." She did not know the words, but she felt the meaning. He gestured toward the horizon, toward the faint smoke. A place of warmth, a place of safety, a place where her child could live. Her heart pounded. To leave with him was to step into the unknown. His people might reject her. They might fear her. But to stay here, in the snow, meant only death. She looked at her child, glowing faintly in her arms. She thought of all she had sacrificed, all she had burned, all she had endured. She thought of the moment she had nearly collapsed, when hope had been nothing but Ashdod. And then she thought of him, the human who had given his coat, his food, his medicine, his fire. The human who had looked at her child not as an alien, not as a burden, but as life worth saving. Her decision was made. She nodded once, slowly, strongly. The human gave a small smile. He stepped aside, holding the shelter flap open. She stepped forward, the child in her arms. Walking into the light of a new day, the snow crunched under their feet as they began the journey together. The storm was gone, but the world was still dangerous. Yet for the first time, the mother did not feel alone. She glanced at the human walking beside her. He carried his pack, his rifle, his machines of light. But more than that, he carried something invisible, something stronger than fire, stronger than storms. Hope, her child, reached out a hand toward the sky, the glowing lines on its skin pulsing brighter. It was as if the small being was greeting the sun, greeting life itself. The mother smiled through her tears, and the human, watching them both, felt something stir in his chest. A truth as old as time, a truth no storm could erase. Sometimes humanity is not about blood. Sometimes it is not about species. Sometimes it is only about heart. Together, they walked into the white horizon not as alien and human, not as strangers, but as survivors bound by one fire, the fire of hope, the fire of a new beginning.